So picture this, right? You've studied all the grammar books. You can watch, I mean, a 2-hour movie in English totally without subtitles.
Right.
And you understand the plot perfectly.
Yeah, you know exactly what's going on.
Exactly. You know, hundreds, maybe thousands of vocabulary words. But then the second a barista at a coffee shop just looks at you
Yeah.
and simply asks, how's your day going?
Oh, the worst.
Right. Your brain just completely shuts down. You're trapped in this freeze.
Yeah.
The vocabulary vanishes, your palms start to sweat, and you just stand there staring blankly, feeling like you've suddenly, I don't know, forgotten how to speak any language at all.
It is, it's a universally agonizing experience. I mean, anyone who has ever tried to learn a second language knows that exact chill down the spine.
Oh, absolutely.
You're standing there in the coffee shop. The silence just stretches out for what feels like an
Eternity, yeah.
And that social panic really sets in because, you aren't lacking the knowledge. The information is filed away somewhere in your brain. But the retrieval system has it's suffered a catastrophic failure right there in real time.
A total crash. And, well, what we are doing today in this deep dive is tearing apart that exact moment of failure, really trying to understand the mechanics behind it.
Yeah.
We're exploring this universal phenomenon that plagues language learners all across the globe. But there is this phrase in Vietnamese that captures this specific agonizing paralysis better than literally any academic term I've seen.
Oh, it's such a good phrase.
It really is. It's "so se nen kong dam ming noi," which, for you listening, translates to the paralyzing fear of making mistakes that stops us from daring to open our mouths to speak.
Yeah, that phrase is just brilliant.
Right.
Because it diagnoses the entire pathology in a single sentence. I mean, it links the physical symptom, which is the inability to open your mouth directly to the psychological root cause.
Which is the fear.
Exactly. The terror of being incorrect in front of another human being.
Yeah.
It treats the silence not as a lack of vocabulary, but as, well, a defense mechanism.
A defense mechanism, yeah. That's a great way to put it. So to figure out how to dismantle that defense mechanism, we're looking at a pretty fascinating stack of primary sources today.
We are.
We have the daily transcripts from the first 10 days of the Speak Up Sessions English podcast. This is a 30-day fluency challenge featuring a teacher named Masu and a student named Fizu.
Yeah, and what is so compelling about these transcripts is just the raw, completely unedited nature of the audio.
It's so raw.
Right. We aren't just reading a polished textbook about how someone, should learn English. We are actually in the room listening to Fizu struggle.
Yeah, you can literally hear it. You hear his audible sighs, the stuttering, those really long, painful pauses.
Those 10-second silences.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually you hear his breakthroughs, too. So it's a real-time blueprint of how to break this silence forever.
Yeah, and if you look closely at day 1 and day 2 of these sessions, it gives us this microscopic view of the cognitive bottleneck that actually causes the freeze.
Right. Masu really zeroes in on that.
He does. Masu points out what Fizu is doing during those painful pauses. He points out that when a question is asked, Fizu isn't just, searching for a single word.
Right. It's way more complicated than that.
Yeah, he is executing this furious, silent, and incredibly complex translation process right in his head.
Yeah, and when I was reading through Masu's breakdown of that whole translation sequence, it just hit me why the freeze happens. I mean, we tend to think of listening and replying as two simple steps, right? You hear it, you answer.
Right, input and output.
Exactly. But for a language learner trapped in this so-si mentality, the brain is actually doing, well, triple the workload of a native speaker.
Oh, at least triple.
Yeah. The incoming English sounds have to be decoded first, then physically translated into the native language just to, grasp the concept.
Right.
Then the learner forms a native language reply in their head, translates that reply back into English, and finally tries to articulate the foreign syllables.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
It is. It's like trying to run high-end video editing software on a computer from 1995.
The processor just maxes out.
Exactly. It maxes out and the system crashes.
You've totally nailed the cognitive mechanics of it. The human brain simply does not have the working memory capacity to function as a simultaneous interpreter while also, engaging in spontaneous social interaction.
Right. I mean, simultaneous interpreters, the people who translate at the United Nations, they undergo years of rigorous cognitive training just to handle that specific neurological load.
Yes, and even they have to switch out every 20 minutes or so to avoid mental exhaustion.
Wow, really? every 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's that intense.
hmm
So when a learner tries to do this in a casual conversation, the resulting silence or, the incredibly slow speech, it isn't a sign of poor intelligence.
Not at all.
It is quite literally the audible sound of the brain's processing power being completely overwhelmed by all these unnecessary background tasks.
Okay, but if this mental translation is so inefficient,
Yeah.
right, and it causes the system to crash, we really have to look at why we all do it in the first place,
Right.
because it is an involuntary reflex for most of us. And I'd argue that we do it because it is exactly what traditional education trains us to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about middle school language classes,
Yeah.
You're handed a stack of flashcards. One side has a picture of an apple and the word apple,
Yeah.
and the other side has the word in your native language.
Yeah.
We are systematically conditioned to build a bridge between the new language and our native tongue, rather than building a bridge between the new language and the actual object itself.
Exactly. Traditional education relies on that method because, well, it is highly effective for passing written tests.
Right, it's easily gradable.
Yeah, a teacher can easily grade whether you have successfully matched an English word to a native word on a piece of paper. But as Masu points out to Fizo in these transcripts, translation is a tool for academic comprehension.
Right.
It is not a tool for dynamic speaking. Using your native language as a crutch to learn vocabulary creates a permanent middleman in your neural pathways.
Okay, which brings up the obvious problem here, right?
Yeah.
How do you fire the middleman?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Because just telling an anxious student to, just stop translating, well, that's as useless as telling someone to just stop being anxious.
Right, just relax. It never works.
Exactly. If the neural pathway is already paved, you can't just wish it away.
No, you can't. But Masu introduces a very specific, practical, cognitive exercise to combat this, and he uses a dog as the primary example.
Oh, yeah, the dog example is great.
It is. He tells Fizu to imagine walking down the street and seeing a dog. The deeply ingrained reflex for a learner is to see the animal, retrieve the native word for it, and then look up the English equivalent in their mental dictionary.
Right, going through the middleman.
Exactly. But Masu instructs Fizu to completely bypass the language center of the brain for a moment.
Yeah.
He wants Fizu to look at the animal, take in the visual data, the fur, the tail, the way it moves, and force the brain to map those raw sensory inputs directly to the sound dog.
Okay, so it's really about forging a completely new neural link.
Yes.
You're tying the English vocabulary directly to the visual cortex
Yeah.
and your sensory experience of the real world, rather than routing it through the linguistic database of your first language.
Precisely.
It reminds me of how a child learns their very first language.
Oh, that's a perfect comparison.
Right. Because they don't have a foundational dictionary to translate from. They just see a furry thing barking, their parent points and says dog, and the connection is made instantly.
Yeah, Masu is essentially asking Fizu to recreate that childhood sensory mapping.
Right.
And, it sounds simple, but rewriting a hardened neural pathway takes an immense amount of deliberate, conscious effort at first.
Oh, I'm sure it's exhausting.
It will feel strange. The brain will constantly try to default back to the native language because, well, that is the path of least resistance.
Yeah, the brain is lazy. It wants to take the easy road.
Exactly. But as Fizu begins to practice this visual to English mapping over the first few days, the transcripts show the translation lag actually starting to shrink. The middleman slowly gets edged out of the equation.
But, while that cognitive rewiring is happening on a mechanical level, there is a whole other crisis happening in the nervous system.
Oh, yeah, the emotional side.
Right. The translation bottleneck might be the mechanical cause of the silence, but the emotional cause is what gives the freeze its actual paralyzing power. It all comes down to the fear of being wrong.
Yeah, and this is where we see Fizu at his most vulnerable in the source material. In those early days, he's incredibly candid about his emotional state.
He really is. It's refreshing, honestly.
It is. He admits that he feels a deep sense of embarrassment and shyness. He explicitly tells Masu that he worries people will laugh at his errors. He says, and this is a quote, "I want to speak fluently, but I make mistakes and then I feel embarrassed."
Wow. Yeah, that is the absolute core of the sussai mentality.
It is.
It's the assumption that a mistake is a humiliating social failure.
Exactly. And Masu's response to this confession is the philosophical anchor for the entire 30-day challenge.
It really changes everything.
It does. He doesn't just offer empty comfort like, oh, don't worry about it, you're doing great.
Right.
He fundamentally redefines the concept of a mistake. Masu insists that mistakes are the empirical proof of effort.
I love that. Proof of effort.
He tells Fizu that if he isn't making mistakes, he literally isn't pushing his boundaries enough to actually learn. The absence of mistakes doesn't mean you are fluent, it just means you are playing it too safe.
Right. Mosu is attacking a very pervasive, honestly toxic assumption about what fluency actually looks like.
Yeah.
Because the Susai fear is built on this totally false premise that fluency equals perfection.
Oh, yeah. People really believe that.
They do. Learners convince themselves that native speakers operate with flawless grammar, perfect pronunciation, and this encyclopedic vocabulary at all times.
Which is just not true.
No. They measure their own messy, halting progress against an impossible standard of, like, broadcast quality perfection. They think they need to sound like a university professor delivering a prepared lecture rather than a normal person just ordering a sandwich.
Exactly. If you actually listen to native speakers in a casual setting, they are constantly stumbling.
All the time.
They lose their train of thought, they use the wrong verb tense, they resort to filler words like and like, and they frequently restart their sentences halfway through.
Yeah, just like we're doing right now.
Exactly. Comfort and natural flow are the real markers of fluency, not grammatical invulnerability.
That's a great point. Redefining fluency as comfort rather than perfection completely shifts the stakes of the conversation for the learner.
It lowers the pressure immensely.
Yeah, because if the goal is just to maintain the flow of communication, then a grammatical error isn't a failure anymore. It's just a minor bump in the road.
Right, and Masu uses a fantastic analogy in the transcripts to drive this home. He compares learning to speak a language to a toddler learning how to walk.
Oh, I love this analogy.
It's so good. If that toddler possessed the Sunsai mentality, if they were so terrified of tripping, falling, and looking foolish that they refused to try, they would never leave the floor.
Right, they just crawl forever.
Exactly. The only way to learn balance is to lose it.
So true. And building on that, when a toddler falls, the brain is actively collecting vital data.
Yes, it's a feedback loop.
Exactly. It registers the misstep, it adjusts the spatial awareness, and it calibrates the muscles for the next attempt. The fall isn't a failure, it is the calibration mechanism itself.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And when a language learner makes a mistake out loud, they are generating the exact same kind of necessary feedback data. You cannot calibrate your spoken English without the data provided by getting it wrong first.
You really can't. And the transcripts give us a spectacular, highly specific example of this feedback loop in action on day 6.
Oh, I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Yeah, Fizu is recounting a story, and he accidentally uses the phrase, I am boring, instead of, I am bored.
Yes. Oh, man. That is one of the most common and, honestly, psychologically agonizing traps for an English learner.
It really is. It happens all the time.
It does. And you can instantly imagine the horror for someone suffering from the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, the panic.
Right. You're trying to tell a group of people that the movie you watched was dull, and instead you accidentally declare to the room that your entire personality is incredibly tedious.
That you're just a boring person.
Exactly. In a traditional rigid classroom, or even just in the mind of an anxious learner, that is a moment of pure burning shame. You just insulted yourself in a foreign language.
You did. But what is truly instructive here is Masu's reaction to this error. There is no sharp correction. There's no red pen, no sigh of disappointment. He actually greets the mistake with genuine enthusiasm.
Gets excited about it.
He does. He turns it into a fascinating, neutral exploration of how a simple suffix changes the entire reality of a sentence.
Yeah. He highlights the fundamental difference between describing a temporary emotional state, like being bored by a movie, versus describing a permanent personality trait, being a boring person.
Exactly. And by reacting with curiosity rather than judgment, Masu instantly defangs the fear.
He totally removes the shame.
He shows Fizu that the mistake is not a reflection of his intelligence. It's just a mechanical quirk of the English language involving ed versus ing. When the teacher normalizes the error, the student can finally let go of the shame and actually absorb the lesson.
This really forces us to look at the reality of human interaction outside the classroom, too.
Yeah, how people actually behave.
Right, because the Susai mentality relies on the assumption that the world is full of hostile critics just waiting to pounce on your bad grammar.
Which is such a stressful way to view the world.
It is. It assumes the person across the counter is secretly grading your performance. But if we extrapolate this to everyday life, real people generally possess a lot of empathy for someone struggling to speak a second language.
They really do. Most people just want to help.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
If you are trying to communicate, people will meet you halfway.
I'd even say anyone who would actually mock a learner for mixing up a suffix is revealing their own lack of character, not the learner's lack of skill.
100%.
The priority in a real-world setting is always connection and comprehension. If you order a coffee and use the wrong tense, but the barista hands you the correct coffee, the interaction was a complete success.
Right, the communication occurred.
Yes. The demand for grammatical perfection is an artificial standard imposed by the learner, not by the listener.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time diagnosing the pathology of the freeze. We understand the cognitive overload of the translation trap, and we understand the emotional paralysis of the fear of mistakes. The theory is clear, right?
Right, the why makes sense.
Yeah. But the speak-up sessions, transcripts are so valuable because they don't just offer psychological comfort, they actually mandate a rigorous physical regimen.
They do. It's very action-oriented.
Yes. The sources introduce practical daily exercises to actively dismantle these barriers, and the most heavily utilized tool in Masu's arsenal is a technique called shadowing.
Ah, shadowing. Shadowing is arguably the most potent mechanical exercise for a language learner, and it appears constantly throughout the 10 days of transcript.
Right, it's everywhere in the text.
Yeah. For clarity, shadowing involves listening to a sentence spoken by a native speaker and repeating it out loud almost simultaneously, just lingering a split second behind the original audio.
I can see immediately why this attacks the translation trap.
Oh, it destroys it.
Right. Because if you are forced to repeat the sounds the millisecond you hear them, your brain simply does not have the processing time to route those words through your native language.
Exactly. You are forcefully bypassing the cognitive bottleneck.
You don't have the luxury of pausing to analyze the grammar or consult your mental dictionary.
You are removing the heavy lifting of sentence construction entirely. By mimicking the audio, you are borrowing the speaker's rhythm, their intonation, their speed, and their pronunciation.
Okay.
So the brain can stop worrying about what to say and focus entirely on the physical mechanics of how to say it.
But there is a very common criticism of this method, and I definitely want to explore it.
Sure.
Because if all Fizu is doing is parroting sentences back to a recording, how is that actually teaching him to have a spontaneous conversation?
Right, the parrot criticism.
Yeah, like if he repeats, the train arrives at 6 o'clock 50 times. That doesn't seem to help him when someone unexpectedly asks him for directions to the museum.
The criticism makes total sense if you view speaking purely as an academic retrieval of vocabulary.
Terrible.
But Masu's approach, and really the science behind shadowing, treats speaking a language as a complex motor skill. Shadowing is designed to build the speaking muscle.
Okay, let's break down what the speaking muscle actually entails, because I think people completely underestimate the physical labor of a new language.
They really do. Speaking English requires totally different facial muscle contractions, different tongue placements against the teeth and palate, and entirely different breathing rhythms compared to speaking Vietnamese.
Oh, absolutely.
When an adult tries to produce a completely unfamiliar phoneme, like the English th sound, the mouth literally feels awkward and uncomfortable.
It feels wrong.
Yeah. And that physical discomfort sends a distress signal back to the brain, which heightens the anxiety and exacerbates the freeze.
Wow. Okay, so by shadowing repeatedly, you are forcing the mouth to perform these alien gymnastics over and over again until they aren't alien anymore.
Yes, you are building muscle memory in your jaw and tongue.
Right.
Once the physical delivery system is automated and feels natural, the brain reclaims all that processing power. It doesn't have to think about how to move the tongue, so it can finally focus on retrieving the actual vocabulary for the spontaneous conversation.
You are automating the vehicle so the driver can focus on the destination.
That's a great way to say it.
And this concept of reducing the cognitive burden, it ties directly into another major strategy. Masu just hammers into Fizu, which is the reliance on simple English.
Oh, I love this part of the transcripts because Masu constantly catches Fizu trying to construct these incredibly elaborate, complex sentences, only to stumble and fall totally silent.
Right. He's trying to sound so sophisticated.
Yes, and Masu tells him explicitly that he doesn't need to sound like a poet or a professor. When the vocabulary fails, as it inevitably will, the absolute worst thing you can do is stop and search the archives for 30 seconds.
Right, because then the freeze sets in.
Exactly. The primary objective is to keep the communication flowing. If Fizu is trying to describe a spa day and forgets the word relaxing, the sai-sai mentality will cause him to freeze, panic and just stare at the ceiling, trying to remember the perfect adjective.
We've all been there.
But Masu's rule is to take the path of least resistance. If you forget relaxing, just say nice. If you forget devastated, just say sad.
It's prioritizing momentum over precision.
Yes, momentum is everything.
By substituting a simple, universally understood word, the conversation stays alive, the momentum continues, and momentum is the natural enemy of the freeze. If you keep moving, the panic doesn't have time to settle in.
Exactly. But implementing shadowing and practicing simple English requires consistency, and this leads us to the most counterintuitive and frankly the most awkward piece of advice found in the source material.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Masu tells Fizu that he needs to practice speaking out loud every single day, even when he is completely alone.
The solo practice.
The solo practice.
Yeah. Masu is absolutely adamant that consistency over time is vastly more effective than cramming. He tells Fizu that speaking out loud for 5 to 10 minutes every single day will yield exponentially better results than sitting in silence and reading a grammar textbook for 4 hours every Sunday.
It's so true. For a learner who doesn't live in an English-speaking country and doesn't have a conversation partner readily available, the solo practice is an absolute lifeline.
Yeah, they have to create their own immersion.
Right. But the specific method Masu prescribes is what makes it so effective. He instructs Fizu to actively narrate his daily, mundane routines out loud.
He wants him to walk around his house acting like a play-by-play sports announcer for his own life.
Basically, yes.
The examples in the text are wonderfully ordinary. Fizu is told to stand in his kitchen and literally say to the empty room, "I am walking to the fridge. I am opening the door. I am taking out the milk. I am pouring the milk into the glass."
And it feels incredibly silly to the learner at first.
Oh, I'm sure you feel ridiculous.
You feel like you are losing your mind talking to your appliances. But the neurological benefits are immense. By narrating your life to an empty room, you are completely neutralizing the sauce-eye factor. The stakes are reduced to zero. The refrigerator isn't going to laugh at your pronunciation. The coffee pot isn't judging your use of the present continuous tense.
It strips away all the social panic and emotional baggage, allowing the brain to focus entirely on the cognitive task of active recall.
Yes.
And what I find fascinating is how this circles back to our earlier point about the dog.
Oh, good point, yes.
When you are chopping vegetables and you say out loud, "I am chopping an onion," you are mapping the English vocabulary directly to the physical action in your hands and the pungent smell in the air.
You're bypassing the middleman again.
Exactly. You're reinforcing that direct bridge to reality and bypassing the translation dictionary.
Masu actually uses another brilliant metaphor in Day 6 to explain the trajectory of this daily practice. He compares the process of learning to speak English to the process of learning to ride a bicycle.
Oh, the bicycle analogy is perfect.
It is a perfect illustration of motor skill acquisition.
Let's delve into the mechanics of that bicycle analogy because the wobble is the most important part.
Yeah, let's talk about the wobble.
When you first sit on a bicycle, you have no muscle memory for the complex physics required to stay upright. So your conscious brain tries to manage every single component simultaneously.
Right.
You are constantly thinking, keep the back straight, apply pressure to the left pedal, pull up on the right, grip the handlebars, shift weight to the left.
It's too much information. The conscious brain is overwhelmed by all those micro adjustments, which result in jerky movements, overcorrections, and an incredibly slow, wobbly ride.
And that wobble is exactly what happens when you are trying to construct a sentence while consciously filtering it through grammar rules.
Yes.
You start a sentence and suddenly your brain interrupts with, wait, is this an irregular verb? Should I use the past perfect here? Am I pronouncing the R correctly?
Stop.
Yeah, the overprocessing causes you to stammer, wobble, and grind to a halt.
But the crucial insight here is that the wobble on the bicycle is not a failure. It is the physical manifestation of the brain gathering data.
Right. Back to the toddler walking analogy.
Exactly. Every time the bike leans too far to the left and you have to catch yourself, your brain maps that failure and adjusts the neural pathway for balance.
It's learning.
It is. With 5 minutes of daily practice, the brain absorbs enough data that the conscious processing just fades away. The body takes over, the balance becomes automatic, and you finally stop staring at the pedals and start looking at the road ahead.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The fluency and the speed come naturally, but only after you have endured the slow, wobbly, embarrassing phase.
You can't skip the wobble.
No. You have to allow yourself to be wobbly in the kitchen, talking to your coffee pot, before you can ride smoothly in public.
And this transition from the solo practice in the kitchen to writing smoothly in public is the focus of the practical role plays throughout the 10 days.
Right, the role plays are huge.
They are. The Speak Up Challenge doesn't leave Fizu in isolation. They aggressively steer away from whiteboard grammar lessons and plunge directly into situational, real-world English.
It's such a vital shift in methodology. Instead of teaching the abstract theory of the language, Masu teaches the survival mechanics of daily life.
Yes.
The transcripts dedicate significant time to scenarios like navigating a restaurant, making an appointment at a doctor's office, asking a stranger on the street for directions, and there's a highly specific scenario about going back into a clothing store to return a shirt because it's a size too small.
Yeah, very specific, but very common in real life. If we examine these role plays, the strategic genius lies in Masu's use of language, chunks.
Chunks, yes. Let's talk about chunks.
He recognizes that placing Fizu in a scenario where he has to invent a complex sentence from scratch while a busy cashier is tapping their foot, well, that is a recipe for the freeze.
Totally, the panic sets in immediately.
So Masu equips Fizu with pre-assembled modular phrases.
It's like giving him a tool belt where the tools are already perfectly calibrated.
Yeah.
Instead of teaching Fizu the grammatical structure required to request a beverage, Masu just gives him the chunk, can I have, or it's like.
Exactly. And memorizing these functional chunks through the daily shattering practice, Fizu eliminates the cognitive load of sentence construction in high-pressure moments.
Right.
When the waiter approaches the table, the panic doesn't set in because the phrase, table for one, please, or can I get this to go, is already locked and loaded in his working memory.
We see this evolution toward natural modular language so clearly in the specific interactions from the transcripts.
Oh, definitely.
On day one, when Masu asks Fizu how he is doing, Fizu relies on the stiffest, most robotic default answer programmed into every language learner. He just says, I am fine.
I am fine. It is grammatically correct, sure, but socially dead.
It totally halts the conversation.
It does. It gives the other person nowhere to go. Masu immediately steps in and teaches him natural flowing variations. He introduces, I'm doing well, thanks for asking, how about you?
Right.
It's a small, simple chunk of language, but it instantly transforms the interaction from an academic interrogation into a warm, reciprocal human exchange.
Yeah, it changes the whole vibe. Another pivotal moment occurs when Fizu is describing his weekend activities. He makes the classic tense error and says, I stay home yesterday.
Right, because the brain was so focused on retrieving the vocabulary for home and yesterday that it dropped the past tense marker on the verb.
Exactly. But what happens next is a massive milestone in the transcripts. Almost immediately after saying it, Fizu realizes the error and self-corrects to, I stayed home.
He catches his own wobble.
He catches his own wobble. This demonstrates that the rules of English grammar are finally migrating from passive theoretical knowledge stored in the back of his mind into an active, real-time filtering system.
It's amazing to read. We also see the power of chunks when they tackle the restaurant menu. Instead of Fizu trying to construct a conditional request explaining his dietary preferences, Masu gives him the simple, highly effective chunk. Can I have a salad on the side?
Right. These scenarios are so effective because they fundamentally shift the learner's metric for success.
They do. They move the goalposts.
Exactly. It moves the goalposts from academic perfection to practical survival. The anxiety of, am I using the present perfect continuous correctly, is replaced by the much more manageable question, did the waiter understand that I want sparkling water instead of still water?
And if the water arrives, you win.
You win. The language ceases to be a subject to be mastered and becomes a tool to be utilized.
Yeah, and this brings us to the ultimate payoff of this 10-day data set, which is the emotional and psychological transformation of Fizu himself.
It's quite a journey.
The transcripts don't just document a widening vocabulary, they document a profound shift in identity.
Yeah, if you track his emotional arc from day 1 to day 10, it is striking. On the first day, the transcripts reveal a learner who is practically drowning in anxiety.
He's so nervous.
He is overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the challenge ahead. He is frustrated by his constant internal translation, he is terrified of making mistakes, and he's a perfect avatar for the so-sai mentality.
He really is, yet by day 10, the dynamic between the teacher and student has shifted completely.
It's like night and day.
Fizu is no longer just passively answering questions, he is actively initiating the conversation. He is inquiring about Masu's weekend plans.
Wow.
He is deploying his language chunks confidently. He is self-correcting without shame. And most importantly, he is explicitly proud of the progress he has made.
This emotional journey proves the core thesis of the entire deep dive, doesn't it?
It really does.
The barrier to speaking a new language is almost entirely psychological. It is not a deficit of intelligence, memory, or capability. It is the fear blocking the access to the capability you already possess.
Exactly. When Fizu commits to the daily 5 minutes of practice, when he embraces the absurdity of narrating his kitchen routine, and when he actively chooses to view his mistakes as calibration data rather than failures, he strips the fear of its power.
He takes the power back.
He does. He moves from a state of paralyzed frustration to a state of active empowerment.
There's a brilliant, subtle detail in the transcripts that highlights how Masu facilitates this psychological shift too. In the latter half of the 10 days, Masu doesn't just teach vocabulary related to shopping or dining. He explicitly teaches Fizu words like confident, frustrated, rewarding, and progress.
Oh, that is a masterclass in pedagogy. Masu is arming his student with a specific emotional vocabulary required to articulate the internal struggle of learning.
Right. By teaching Fizu the word frustrated, Masu gives him the power to name his anxiety. When you can say, I am frustrated because I can't remember the word, you are no longer suffering in silent panic, you are communicating a reality.
You're bringing it out into the open.
Exactly, it normalizes the struggle. And by teaching him the word progress, Masu provides the lens through which Fizu can objectively view his own journey. Giving a learner the words to describe their emotions gives them agency over those emotions.
It's so true. So if we pull back from the specific mechanics of English fluency, what does this 10-day snapshot of Fizu's journey reveal about learning any complex, intimidating skill?
I think it reveals that the walls we build in our minds, the barriers we believe are insurmountable, are often just illusions constructed by our own anxiety.
Yeah.
It proves that small, consistent daily actions will always defeat intense, sporadic cramming. And it demonstrates that leaning directly into the discomfort, intentionally risking the wobble and the scraped knees, is the only way to reach the other side.
It's the only way.
Okay, let's distill the ultimate blueprint for you, the listener. If you are tired of freezing in the coffee shop, if you are ready to shatter the Susai mentality, here is the exact protocol extracted from these transcripts. First, recognize that the freeze is a normal mechanical failure.
Right, it's not a personal failing.
No, it is the result of your brain attempting to simultaneously interpret, translate, and speak while paralyzed by the fear of being wrong. Second, you cannot read your way out of a speaking problem.
You just can't.
You must treat fluency as a physical motor skill. You have to build the speaking muscle in your jaw and tongue.
And you build that muscle through shadowing. You mimic native speakers immediately, bypassing the translation bottleneck entirely and forcing your mouth to adapt to the new shapes and rhythms.
Third, you establish the solo practice. You spend 5 to 10 minutes a day talking out loud to an empty room. You narrate your daily life, making coffee, opening doors, to train your brain to map English words directly to physical reality.
Yes, eliminating your native language middleman in a zero-stakes, zero-judgment environment.
Fourth, you rely on simple English and pre-assembled chunks of language. You abandon the desire to sound poetic, and you prioritize keeping the momentum of the conversation alive.
Momentum over perfection.
Always. And finally, the most critical step, you radically reframe your relationship with mistakes. You invite them in. You recognize that every grammatical error, every wrong verb tense, every wobble on the bicycle is the exact data your brain needs to calibrate your balance.
Yeah.
You must be willing to be messy.
You have to be.
We opened this deep dive by looking at the frustration of the broken machine. We possess the vocabulary, we understand the grammar, but the output fails. What Fizu's journey teaches us is that the machine isn't broken at all.
It's not.
It just requires a completely different type of fuel. It cannot run on perfectionism. It runs on consistent, messy practice, the momentum of simple words, and the courage to open your mouth knowing you might get it wrong.
Expanding on that courage, I really want to offer a final thought for you to carry into your next interaction.
Let's hear it.
The core of the Sai mentality is the belief that perfection is what earns us respect and connection.
Right.
We are terrified of sounding foolish because we believe our flaws will isolate us. But consider the psychology of human connection. When you stand in front of a native speaker, struggle to find a word, make a glaring grammatical mistake, laugh at yourself and try again, you are displaying immense vulnerability.
You are?
And vulnerability is the strongest magnet for human empathy. Perfection is sterile. It builds walls. Struggle is human. It builds bridges. What if the mistakes you are so desperately trying to hide are actually the very things that make people warm up to you, root for you, and connect with you on a deeper, more authentic level.
The vulnerability isn't the bug in the system, it's the feature.
Exactly.
That is a brilliant realization to leave on. Embrace the wobble, make the mistakes, and start speaking. That's all for today's deep dive. Until next time.